All right, so we're diving into some fascinating stuff today. This whole world of female friendships. You've given us a bunch of sources, especially Irene Levine's book, Best Friends Forever. And I'm kind of getting the feeling that we're not going for the, the typical friendship is always sunshine and rainbows
Yes.
approach. We're going deeper on like the good, the bad, and the complicated.
Exactly. It's like we, especially as young women, buy into this myth of forever friendships, but really friendships are way more fluid. They change just like we do.
Yeah, and Dr. Levine really gets that. She uses all these personal stories from women, plus like her background as a psychologist, to paint this picture of female friendships that is like relatable, but also makes you think.
She's really good at, showing how different real friendships are from those idealized ones we see like in pop culture. Remember Anna Green Gables? Her and Diana swearing to be bosom friends forever. Talk about setting the bar high.
Seriously. It's like we're set up for disappointment with that whole forever thing. I mean, people change, their priorities change, and like Dr. Levine says, those changes can sometimes show like fundamental differences that were always there, but we didn't see.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, like, what makes a friendship really click in the first place?
Yeah, it can't just be about having things in common, right?
Yeah.
Like I could love the same music as someone, but still not feel that like deeper connection.
Right. Dr. Levine talks about intimacy and reciprocity. Like, real friendship needs that vulnerability, letting someone see the real you and feeling seen in return. She even has this great phrase. She says it's about feeling comfortable as a pair of well-worn blue jeans with a friend. Have you ever felt that? Like that instant
Oh,
connection?
totally. Like you could just be yourself, no pretending or anything.
Yeah.
But even with that, things can still go wrong. Dr. Levine talks a lot about why friendships break down, and it's not always gradual.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's sudden and painful.
And unlike romantic breakups, it's not always clear why it ended, no closure, which can leave you feeling confused, hurt, and even embarrassed.
She talks about some common causes of breakups. Some of them were really surprising to me, like unmet expectations, especially during those big life moments. She uses the example of Karen and Megan. Karen missed Megan's dad's funeral.
That one's tough, shows how differently we experience grief. We might think our friends will be there for us in a certain way, and then they don't do what we expected. And that can cause a rift, especially when you're already so vulnerable. Have you ever had that happen?
Totally. It's like you expect a certain level of support, and when it's not there, it feels almost like betrayal, even if your friend didn't mean it that way.
Yeah, and another tough one is when family's involved. Dr. Levine talks about that too. Those conflicts can be so intense because, your friends and family are all mixed up together. Like the story of Susie and Pam. Their friendship ended because of Pam's comments about Susie's husband being unemployed.
Ouch, yeah, that one was hard to read. Makes you realize how easily things can blow up when it's about family. Suddenly the stakes are so much higher. And sometimes those core values we have, they can just create this huge gap, even in friendships that have lasted forever.
Right. And she gives the example of Cherry Z and Detsy. They stopped being friends because of Cherry Z moving in with her fiancé before marriage. Betsy had more traditional beliefs and she just couldn't accept it. It shows how much those personal beliefs can impact even our closest relationships.
It's like those beliefs are non-negotiable. And when they clash, it's almost impossible to find common ground.
Definitely. And those are hard enough, but maybe the worst thing that can happen is betrayal. Linda's story where her friend Susan told Linda's daughter a family secret when her daughter was going through a lot. Ugh, heartbreaking. Just shows how much damage breaking trust can do.
Dr. Levine doesn't shy away from the messy stuff, that's for sure. She even talks about those big blowout arguments, the kind that can end a friendship right there.
Yeah. She uses the example of Jen and Sarah. They were friends for a long time, shared lots of experiences, even played competitive squash together. But then they had this huge fight about Sarah's super rigid scheduling habits. And that was it.
Wow. It's crazy how one fight can change everything. And you know what makes it even harder these days? Technology.
Oh, for sure. Dr. Levine talks about how email and texting and social media can make things so much worse
Yeah.
because you miss all those little cues, like tone of voice and facial expressions. Remember Caroline and Judy? Their friendship ended because of a mean email. It's so easy to misinterpret things in writing, and without seeing each other face to face, it's really hard to smooth things over.
It's like technology adds this whole other layer of complication, and not always in a good way.
Definitely makes you wonder how many friendships have ended just because of a text message or an email that was taken the wrong way. Something to think about, especially now that so many of us communicate online all the time. It really does make you think twice about how you write that email. But going back to friendships ending, we can't forget about romantic relationships. A new romance can really mess things up, even in a strong friendship, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like when your friend starts dating someone new and suddenly everything changes. Dr. Levine has some pretty intense examples. There's Sue, whose friends started going after Sue's ex, like right after they broke up.
Oof. Yeah, that's rough. That makes you question everything, right? Like, were they even really my friend if they could do that?
Exactly. It
Mm.
feels like such a betrayal, even if they didn't mean it that way. And then there are those times when it's not so clear cut, like when a friendship turns into a romance and then back again.
Yeah.
Dr. Levine talks about Nicole and Lacey. They dated for a little bit, but then decided they were better off as friends.
Yeah. That's tricky. Even if both people agree to just be friends, there can still be feelings and insecurities that make it hard, you know? And then there's that whole third wheel thing, which I think we've all experienced at some point, like when a third person comes into a close friendship and things get weird. Have you ever been in that situation?
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like that saying, two's company, three's a crowd. Suddenly, it's not just the two of you anymore. Dr. Levine uses the story of Carrie and Jolene. Jolene's boyfriend was really possessive, and he basically took up all her time. Carrie ended up feeling totally left out.
Classic example. It shows how even good changes like a friend finding love can cause problems if you're not careful. It takes work to keep things balanced, communication compromise. What really struck me about all these stories was that Dr. Levine doesn't try to make it seem less painful. She gets that breaking up with a friend can be even harder than a romantic breakup.
So true. And I think it's because we don't really talk about it as much.
Yeah.
You know, like society doesn't acknowledge how important these friendships are or how much it hurts when they end.
Exactly. It's like we're supposed to believe that friendships should be easy and drama-free, which is ridiculous. And when they end especially badly, there's not a lot of support or understanding.
It can be really lonely, like you're going through this intense thing, but no one else gets it.
Hmm.
But Dr. Levine talks about all the different stages you go through, the shock, the anger, the sadness, and finally acceptance. It's good to know those feelings are normal.
Yeah, it's like she's saying it's okay to grieve, to feel those feelings. It's a real loss. And it's not just about losing the friendship itself, but like all the shared memories and routines. And then there's all that self-doubt, wondering if you did something wrong.
She also talks about toxic friendships, which I thought was really interesting. She says it's usually not about the people themselves, but the dynamics of the relationship.
Right.
And sometimes we're part of the problem without even realizing it.
Right. She gives the example of Shauna, who was always leaning on her friend for support, to the point where it became too much for the other person. It wasn't that Shauna was a bad friend. She just didn't realize how her neediness was affecting things.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're always taking but never giving it, creates this imbalance that ends up hurting the friendship.
And it's not always about neediness either. Dr. Levine talks about other toxic traits like being unpredictable or moody or negative all the time. She says we need to pay attention to the energy we bring to our friendships. And if it's mostly stress, maybe it's time to reassess.
Like a gut check, right? If you dread talking to a certain friend, or you always feel drained after spending time with them, that's a sign something's not right.
And it doesn't always mean ending the friendship. Sometimes it's about setting boundaries or being more upfront about what you need, or even getting help like therapy to learn healthier relationship skills.
Dr. Levine uses a great metaphor. She compares friendship to a plant. Sometimes even if you're taking good care of it, a plant won't thrive in a certain spot. Maybe it needs more sun, less water, a different pot even.
And sometimes we're the ones who need to change the environment, right? Adjust our expectations, learn to communicate better, or just admit that the friendship has run its course.
It's about being honest with yourself and accepting that it's okay to let go of friendships that aren't working anymore. It doesn't make you a bad person. It means you're taking care of yourself.
I love that quote she uses. It's better to be friendless for a while than to be in a bad friendship. Sticking with a toxic friendship can really hurt you emotionally, and it keeps you from finding better, more fulfilling relationships.
It's like you're making space for something new to come in. Sometimes you got to get rid of the dead weight to let the good stuff grow.
What I appreciate is that Dr. Levine doesn't make anyone out to be the villain. She gets that people mess up, we all have our flaws, and sometimes moving on is the healthiest thing you can do.
And moving on can be a good thing. It gives you a chance to meet new people who are more on the same page as you, and to build friendships that are more balanced and fulfilling.
She encourages us to embrace the fact that friendship is always changing. Our needs change, our interests change, and our friendships should change too. Someone who was a great friend when you were 20 might not be the right fit when you're 30 or 40, and that's totally fine.
It's about being open to new possibilities, meeting new people, and understanding that every friendship, even the ones that end, teaches us something about ourselves.
So what do you think is the most important thing we've learned from this deep dive into female friendships? What will you take away from it for your own relationships?
I think for me, it's remembering that friendships take work. Just like any relationship, you got to put in the effort, communicate, and be willing to adapt. And sometimes the best thing you can do for both of you is to let go.
Well said. I think Dr. Levine's book is a must-read for anyone who wants to have deeper, more genuine friendships. It gives you a whole new way of looking at things. So for our listener, as you think about your own friendships, consider the boundaries you've set, the lessons you've learned, and how much you've grown. And remember, all the ups and downs of friendship are part of what make us who we are.
Yeah, it's like that ancient wisdom, know thyself, but applied to friendship. But it's not just about knowing yourself right. Dr. Levine also says communication is key.
Absolutely. We tend to avoid those tough conversations, but sometimes that's exactly what you need to do to save a friendship.
It's scary though, right? Speaking up,
Ah,
especially when you don't want to hurt their feelings or risk the friendship.
oh, totally. But Dr. Levine makes a good point. It's better to talk about it than to let things build up and, ruin the whole relationship.
She suggests, like, approaching those conversations with empathy and focusing on how you feel instead of blaming them. Like, hey, when you do this, I feel this way, instead of you're always doing this and it's wrong.
Yeah, that's much better. It takes the focus off blame, and you can actually have a productive conversation. But sometimes, even if you try really hard, the conversation doesn't go well, or you realize that maybe the friendship just can't be saved.
And that's when Dr. Levine's advice about letting go is so important. She says it's okay to walk away from friendships that aren't good for you anymore. It doesn't mean you're a bad friend. It just means you're taking care of yourself.
There's this quote of hers that really stuck with me. She says, "It's better to be friendless for a while than to be in a bad friendship." And she's right. Holding on to a friendship that's toxic or draining can really mess you up, and it keeps you from finding those good, fulfilling relationships.
It's like you said before, you got to clear out the dead wood to let the good stuff grow.
Exactly. I like that Dr. Levine doesn't turn anyone into a bad guy you know. She understands that everyone makes mistakes, we all have our flaws, and sometimes the best thing you can do is just move on.
And moving on can be a positive thing. It opens up space to meet new people who get you and to build friendships that are more balanced and make you happy.
Yeah, she really encourages us to accept that friendships are always changing. Our needs change, our interests change, and so do our friendships. A friend who is perfect for you in your 20s might not be the right fit now you know. And that's okay.
It's all about being open to new things, meeting new people, and realizing that every friendship, even the ones that end, teaches you something valuable about yourself.
So true. Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. And to our listeners out there, we hope this has given you some food for thought. As you think about your own friendships, remember those boundaries you've set, the lessons you've learned, and how much you've grown. And never forget the journey of friendship with all its ups and downs is a big part of what makes you you.